So for roughly 45 years, Germany was split in two, and nowhere was this division felt more than here in Berlin. So in this video, I'm going to show you many of the landmarks, museums, and memorials that tell the story of this separation. Most visitors focus only on the few famous attractions that most people know, seemingly unaware of the breadth and depth of the options available to them if they're looking for a deeper dive. And I'll bet that I'm going to mention a few options that you were totally unaware of. So let's get started. So I've broken these down into three sections: everyday life, the wall and the border fortifications, as well as how the occupied powers interacted. And for the first topic, there's a very good chance that you're familiar with our first site, the DDR Museum. The DDR stands for the Deutsche Demokratische Republik, better known in English as the GDR. The museum focuses on life in the GDR, everything from consumer goods and accommodations to the darker side of living in a politically repressed society. It's an interactive and very fun museum. It's great for families. It's centrally located just across from Museum Island. There's even a model Trabant, the GDR's iconic automobile, which you can get into and play as a drive simulator. It covers a wide range of topics, but nothing is covered in exhaustive detail. At the time of recording, it costs €12 per adult ticket to enter, but it is included in the Berlin welcome card and other tourist attraction discount passes, something that I will mention a few times in this video. I have a video explaining these passes that I will link to in the description below. It's a good one-stop shop if you don't want to or you don't have time to dive deeper into these topics.
If a more serious look into the daily lives of the GDR citizens is what you're after, then the museum in their Kulturbraueri might be your better option. And it's free for everyone. Located in the trendy Prenzlauer Berg neighborhood and inside the stables of a former 19th century brewery, this museum's featured exhibit takes a more critical look at the reality of everyday life in the GDR compared to the propaganda and promises of the regime. It focuses on the shortfalls of the GDR's transformation into a Soviet-style socialist society and why its heavy-handed methods led to its downfall. Though less interactive than the DDR Museum, this exhibit uses documents, film and sound recordings, and biographical reports to tell a rather complex story. If the DDR Museum is more like Star Wars, then this exhibit is more like Star Trek, for lack of a better analogy. If you really want to understand the why of the GDR, then I recommend this museum. And if your kids are old enough to have homework in school, then it's probably okay to bring them along as well.
Now, if you really want to take a deep dive, then a visit to the Stasi Museum is an intriguing choice. The Stasi is short for Ministerium der Staatssicherheit, or the Ministry of Security. The Stasi were infamous for their extensive surveillance operations. This included spying on East German citizens, infiltrating almost every aspect of daily life, and using informants to maintain control over the population. The museum, which is located in the former headquarters of the Stasi, is only a 15-minute ride on the U5 from Alexanderplatz. At the time of filming, an adult ticket costs €10, and the museum is included on passes such as the Berlin welcome card. The museum unveils the oppressive tactics used by the Stasi to accomplish their goals, this control. This includes a staggering number of informants. You can see interrogation rooms, surveillance equipment, propaganda materials, as well as an archival records of GDR citizens. You can visit the offices of longtime Stasi Chief Erich Mielke. Now that's not an experience you can get in any city.
If you want to go even deeper into this dark but important history, then you might also consider a trip to the Hohenschönhausen Memorial. Hohenschönhausen was the Stasi secret prison where the regime's opponents were interrogated and tortured. While the exhibitions on site can be explored independently during opening hours, access to the prison complex itself is exclusively through guided tours. And often these tours are led by former prisoners. It's a fascinating look into the oppressive and seemingly sadistic tactics used to control GDR citizens. And at the time of filming, an adult ticket cost €9.
Much less serious is the Trabi Museum. The Trabant was the iconic car of East Germany. It's equivalent of the Volkswagen Beetle. On display are a number of Trabis, including limited edition models as well as some custom varieties. You'll learn about its production and its quirky two-stroke engine. You'll also learn about its production delays, resulting in up to 10-year waits. And the options were very limited. Borrowing from Henry Ford, you can have any model you want as long as it was the model being offered. You can pair your visit to the museum with a visit to Trabi World, which is behind me, where you can book a Trabi safari and make your way through Berlin on a 26 horsepower Trabi. At the time of filming, a ticket to the museum costs €9, and it's usually included in all of Berlin's tourist passes. It's a bit of a tourist trap, but it's certainly a unique experience. And at the very least, hop in and check out the cool little gift shop. Real quick, if you're enjoying this video, perhaps you can share it with somebody who you think might like it. And if you're planning a visit to Berlin, I do offer walking tours. Links will be in the description below. Now back to the video. There's no denying it, the East Side Gallery is likely high up on your bucket list, especially if you're a first-time visitor to Berlin. At 1.3 kilometers long and almost a mile, it's the longest extant piece of the Berlin Wall still found in situ. It's an open-air gallery, art gallery, the largest of its kind in the world. On display are roughly 100 pieces, originally painted in the 1990s, just after the wall fell. It's filled mostly with political messages and messages of unity. It's located between Bornholmer Strasse and the Ostbahnhof train station in the Berlin neighborhood of Friedrichshain. You could be forgiven if you visited here and thought that the Berlin Wall was indeed one wall. But the Berlin Wall actually refers to a border fortification that usually included an inner and outer wall, as well as a death strip, all replete with obstacles to prevent escapes. You won't learn too much about the border fortification system here and the city split just from the wall. For a more informative experience, you might want to consider the Wall Museum.
This very small museum provides a general overview of the Berlin Wall and the city split using eyewitness testimony, films, photographs, and interactive exhibits. It is, though, a superficial look into the construction of the wall, daily life in the GDR, and how the wall came down. And if you're only looking for an easily digestible overview of the topics, then this small museum should do. It's a good introduction, but there are better options, which I will get into now.
This is the first location that you must consider visiting if you really want to learn about this border crossing. Bernauer Strasse was witness to some of the most dramatic early escape attempts. It became a symbolic area for resistance to this barrier and to the regime behind it. And shortly after the wall fell in 1989, many locals here organized to save at least a small portion of the wall from wall peckers and land developers. And thus the Berlin Wall Memorial was born. It stretches 1.5 kilometers and consists of 4 sections. The memorial explains the border construction, its development and maintenance. It also covers how the barrier blocked off streets, removed buildings, churches, cemeteries, anything that got in its way. Most notably, the memorial contains the monument, a relatively well-preserved section of the intact border wall system, consisting of an inner wall, an outer wall, a death strip, and a watchtower. And more than a fair share of escape tunnels bored their way underneath Bernauer Strasse, and you will learn how these tunnels were dealt with. Most importantly, it honors the victims of the GDR regime, in particular those who died trying to cross over into West Berlin. There's no cost to visit this memorial, and you can visit the outdoor exhibit any day of the week. There's also a visitor center and a documentation center. Definitely recommend you come and visit this memorial. Exploring, conserving, and educating the public about Berlin's underground infrastructure is the mission of the Berliner Unterwelten, a non-profit organization. This infrastructure consists of tunnels for water, sewer, gas, and electricity, as well as railways. The organization offers 2 guided tours, which are focused primarily on the Cold War. Tour number 3 covers the Cold War and how the underground was used as nuclear shelters, for example. And Tour M covers how the underground was used to get past Berlin's fortifications, the Berlin Wall, including a chance to see an actual tunnel that was dug underneath here, the Berlin Wall Memorial. I've taken both tours, and I can highly recommend these very unique Berlin experiences. One of Berlin's best free attractions has to be the Tränenpalast. It's located in the heart of Berlin, just outside the U and S-Bahn stations at Friedrichstraße. During the partitioning of Germany, it served as a border crossing for visitors from West Berlin as well as various other countries. Translated into English, it is called the Palace of Tears. The name Tränenpalast is a result of the many tearful goodbyes that East German residents, mostly East Berlin residents, experienced saying goodbye to their family and friends. Today it's a museum focusing on the division of Germany and the erection of the Berlin Wall. There are audio and visual stations as well as photographs and tangible items to help tell the story. It also tells how the story of this checkpoint worked. You can even experience the process by walking through passport control. There is an audio tour to guide you along. Don't miss this wonderful free exhibit, but keep in mind it's not open on Mondays. Here is a quick tip if you plan on taking the S-Bahn to Sachsenhausen concentration camp, or you just like to be somewhere where history was made. If you get off the train at Bornholmer Strasse, you will exit at Bösebrücke. On November 9, 1989, the GDR government announced that its citizens could travel to the west effective immediately. A crowd of determined East Berliners would gradually gather here at Bornholmer Strasse, one of the 8 border crossings and the northernmost station. After some initial resistance from the guards, the laws of physics would prevail and the dam would break. And the rest, they say, is history. Today, on the east side of the bridge is a memorial commemorating this event. You'll find a piece of the inner wall, the side of the wall facing East Berlin, unfortunately defaced by a lack of artistic talent. There are boards with enlarged images showing the scenes here as the border is opened. From east to west, there are metal rails chronicling the timeline of events of the day. Just underneath the bridge is a path, which is part of the Berlin Wall Trail, a 160-kilometer or 100-mile path that follows along the path of the Berlin Wall. You can absorb this all in 20 minutes or less. This is certainly one of the most underrated stops in this video.
If you are planning to visit the Berlin Wall Memorial, then be sure not to miss the complimentary exhibit inside the Nordbahnhof station called Border and Go Stations. Nordbahnhof station was one of 16 stations on 2 U-Bahn and S-Bahn lines that were located either on the border between East and West Berlin or completely inside East Berlin. The lines all started in West Berlin, passed through the east, and then returned to the west. Nordbahnhof station was a go station, which meant that nobody got on or off the train here. The train just passed through with West Berlin passengers. The name Go Station was coined by West Berliners due to the sinister atmosphere in these dimly lit and heavily patrolled stations. Inside is an exhibit explaining how the East German government sealed off these tunnels to stop escape attempts from citizens, rail workers, and even the guards themselves. It also covers how citizens from both East and West Berlin experienced these Go Stations. It's free to visit and is viewable whenever the station is open, which is almost always. This is yet another attraction that is unique to Berlin. I highly recommend.
Now here is an attraction that you might not have heard of before. It's a bit out of the way, roughly 35 minutes by train from Potsdamer Platz, but perhaps it's worth it. As you have learned, there is a lot to see in Berlin documenting escapes from the GDR. But what happened to these people once they left? For people fleeing East Germany, as well as those who were allowed to leave, Marienfelde Refugee Center was their first stop. Here, refugees were provided food, healthcare, as well as temporary housing while they were waiting to be processed and relocated somewhere in West Germany. This memorial tells the story of these refugees through audio and visual guides, as well as artifacts. And it wasn't only used to resettle GDR migrants. People from throughout the Soviet Union, mostly of Germanic descent, as well as refugees from conflicts in Iraq and Syria, for example, were processed here. This might be a good option if you are visiting Berlin for a second or third time.
This museum is one that I'm listing mostly due to its location at Potsdamer Platz. It's more of a photo gallery than a museum, and I must admit that the photos are very interesting and really capture the world around the wall rather well. There are also a few artifacts to see. It costs €10 for an adult ticket. I wouldn't classify this as a tourist trap, but I don't place this one high up on the must-see list. I suspect that a fair share of this museum visitors are those who come for its neighbor, the Spy Museum, which I will cover in just a bit. If you are visiting Berlin from May through October, then you'll have the opportunity to visit the inside of one of the few remaining watchtowers in Berlin. You can climb to the top and experience a view that the border guards once had. It provides insight into the strict surveillance measures along the Berlin Wall. It serves as a memorial to Günter Litfin, the first person shot and killed by East German border guards not too far from here while attempting to escape to West Berlin in 1961. It's a short walk from the Hauptbahnhof and it's free to visit, though tours have a small fee. And it's known that Günter's brother, Jürgen, who is mostly responsible for this memorial, often leads these tours. Definitely worth a check out if you can make it. Here's something to consider when you visit the Reichstag building. Inside the Marie Elisabeth Luders building is the Bundestag's Berlin Wall Memorial. It's located on the other side of the Spree. Parts of the Berlin Wall have been reinstalled here to commemorate the division of the city along the former route of the wall, which passed right in front of the Reichstag. Each piece of the wall lists the number of people killed trying to cross the wall for that year. There is a memorial book commemorating these victims, and there is usually a temporary exhibit about the wall that updates every so often. You can visit every day but Monday. It's definitely worth a quick stop in. Checkpoint Charlie was Berlin's best-known crossing point between Communist East and Democratic West Berlin. It was here that a tense standoff between American and Soviet tanks almost ignited World War III. The border post, sandbags, and warning signs are all replicas, but many find the museum worthy of a visit. It features exhibits on ingenious escape methods, such as hidden compartments in vehicles and makeshift flying machines, alongside artifacts and personal stories. It also explores the broader themes of human rights and the struggle for freedom during the Cold War era. There's also the Black Box exhibit with 16 media stations, a small movie theater, documents, and original objects to demonstrate the Cold War conflict. There's also the Wall Panorama, which shows scenes of East and West Berlin on a random autumn day in the 1980s. All three have ticketed entries and will take some time to get through.
This next site is one of my favorite recommendations. Tempelhof Airport is located in Kreuzberg, just a short ride on the U-Bahn from Checkpoint Charlie. Tempelhof is an airport founded in the early 20th century, and it was greatly enlarged by the Nazis and used as a weapons manufacturing center during the Second World War. But much of its history involves the Cold War, and at least parts of this airport were used as a United States Air Force base. And it's from here that US planes landed filled with goods during the Berlin airlift. It's also where the legend of the candy bomber originated from. Today you can visit on a guided tour. Highlights include a visit to some of the facilities of the base, including an officer's lounge, as well as the basketball court.
You will also walk out to the tarmac to see up close a C-54 Skymaster transport, one of the main transport planes of the airlift.
You'll also visit the bomb shelters, the rooftop, the concourse, and the baggage carousel. This was an active airport, commercial airport, into the 21st century. I highly recommend this must-do Berlin attraction.
Located in a former cinema and library for the US military, the Allied Museum is a free museum that covers the Western Allies' military presence in West Berlin from 1945 to 1994. Some of the highlights include the actual Checkpoint Charlie Guard building, a Royal Air Force Hastings transport plane, as well as a reconstructed Berlin Wall watchtower. There are exhibits on the Berlin airlift, the candy bomber, espionage, and on life for military personnel. It also covers how the Americans, Brits, and French maintained cooperation and dealt with conflicts with the Soviets and East Germans. There's an easily digestible audio tour that really enhances the experience. Its only drawback is its location, deep inside Old West Berlin. It takes between 45 minutes and an hour from central Berlin to reach the museum, but on your way back you could stop at the Rathaus Schönenberg, where US President John F. Kennedy delivered his Ich bin ein Berliner speech. There's an exhibit on his visit inside of Old West Berlin City Hall, though you'll need a Google Translate. But you can still see the balcony from where he gave his speech. Here's yet another unique Berlin attraction. Teufelsberg, which means Devil's Mountain, hosts an abandoned Cold War-era US spy station built on an artificial hill made of World War II rubble. It was once used by the US National Security Agency to intercept Soviet communications. It now stands as a graffiti and street art covered ruin with a surreal atmosphere. You can explore the massive radar domes, enjoy panoramic views of Berlin, and experience its unique mix of history, urban art, and mystery. Perfect for those interested in Cold War espionage, abandoned places, or street art. It's important to note that a guided tour called Mythos Teufelsberg covers the history of the site and gives exclusive access to the radar areas and an exhibit on the Cold War. Expect a bit of a hike to reach it, but the eerie, post-apocalyptic vibe makes it well worth it. Our next attraction is the German Spy Museum. Very much like the DDR Museum, this is a fun and very interactive museum. If you like secret agents, codes, surveillance, and real-life spy stories, this museum is definitely worth a visit. The museum has a significant focus on the espionage activities that took place in Berlin during the Cold War, when the city was a hotbed of spy operations between the East and the West. You'll learn about famous spy stories and see loads of hidden cameras, disguised weapons, and bugging devices used by both Eastern and Western spies. But, like the DDR Museum, the content is quite broad but not very deep. And judging from how well reviewed it is, many people are just fine with that.
So if you like this video, you might also like my video on the Berlin Wall Memorial, or perhaps you want to check out my playlist of walking tours here in Berlin. I hope you found value in this video. Comment below if you plan to visit or have visited any of these locations that I've mentioned, and I will see you in the next video. Tschüss!